Retirement, they said, would be peaceful. You'll finally have time for yourself, Dan, my friends told me at the office party 5 years ago. Play golf, travel, pick up fishing again. What they didn't say, what nobody warns you about, is how quiet everything gets when you're no longer needed. No more calls asking for structural assessments. No blueprints to review. No fires to put out on construction sites. Just silence. A house too big for one man, and days too long for comfort. That's why, when Melissa invited me to the family reunion dinner, I said yes, even though I hated crowds and hated being reminded of how the world kept spinning while I stood still. It's Brian's big night, she said on the phone, her voice bubbling. His promotion finally came through regional executive for Patterson Logistics. We're hosting everyone at Riverbend. You have to be there, Dad. I said I'd come. I even ironed a shirt for the occasion. The restaurant was one of those fancy downtown places where the lighting is so dim you need your phone flashlight to read the menu, and the appetizers have more adjectives than ingredients. Everyone was there, Melissa's in-laws, Brian's co-workers, cousins I hadn't seen in a decade. They all greeted me with smiles too wide and compliments that felt like obligations. Dan, still looking sharp in retirement, huh? Must be nice to not worry about the daily grind. I nodded, shook hands, smiled. I'd learned how to play my part a long time ago. We were seated at a long table near the back, under a crystal chandelier that flickered like it couldn't make up its mind. Melissa and Brian sat at the center, of course, flanked by their children, my grandkids, Emma and Josh. They looked adorable in their matching navy sweaters, eyes darting between phones and bread baskets. The wine flowed fast. Brian kept topping off his glass and others, sloshing it a little too carelessly. Someone raised a toast to his promotion. Another one thanked Melissa for planning everything so perfectly. The laughter grew louder, the conversation looser. Then Melissa stood up. She clinked her fork gently against her wine glass, the sound cutting through the chatter like a bell before a sermon. I just want to say a few words, she said, swaying ever so slightly in her heels. First, thank you all for being here. Brian and I are so blessed to have such an amazing support system. People murmured their agreement. Brian's worked so hard for this, she continued, placing a hand on his shoulder. This promotion means a lot, not just for us, but for our whole family. More nods, more wine sips. And of course, she said, turning her gaze to me, we couldn't have done any of this without the support of my amazing father. My chest tightened, caught between pride and unease. I smiled, nodded slightly. She wasn't finished. Yes, Dad, you've been incredible. Retired 5 years, and still helping out your little girl and her family. I mean, really, you've become our full-time ATM. Laughter exploded around the table. I blinked. Did I hear that right? Even Brian chuckled, raising his glass. Behind every successful man, he declared, is a father-in-law with a pension and a guilt complex. More laughter. My ears rang. I looked at Emma and Josh. They didn't laugh, but they weren't surprised either. They'd heard this before. Probably at home. Probably too often. I felt my smile freeze on my face. The room around me kept laughing, unaware or uninterested that they'd just stripped a man of his dignity. It wasn't the joke that hurt. It was the assumption behind it, that I was some old relic they could tap into whenever the budget ran tight or the mortgage loomed too large. That everything I'd done, every check, every quiet sacrifice had turned me into a punchline. I set down my fork. I looked around the table, made eye contact with Melissa, and I said, softly but clearly, how does it feel to know that your ATM just closed? The laughter stopped like someone had cut the power. Melissa's smile vanished. Brian's eyes narrowed. Someone dropped a fork. I reached for my water glass, took a slow sip, and stood. Enjoy dinner, I said. It's the last one I'll be paying for. I didn't slam my napkin down. I didn't storm out. I simply walked through the quiet dining room, past the maitre d' who opened the door without a word, and into the cool night air. Outside, Nashville was humming. Cars rolled past. A street musician played something bluesy on a harmonica. I stood there for a moment, letting the air clear my head. I had just dropped a bomb in the middle of a celebration, but for the first time in years, I felt light. 15 years of quietly supporting Melissa and Brian, paying for their mortgage when Brian's startup failed, covering Emma's private school tuition when they insisted public school wasn't an option, replacing their broken-down SUV, covering dental work, a vacation to Disney they said they'd pay me back for. They never did. I never asked. Because Melissa was my daughter, and because after her mother died, I'd promised that I'd always be there. But tonight, they laughed at me. They mocked the very lifeline that had kept their family afloat. No more. I drove home in silence. No music, no radio. Just the sound of tires on pavement and the thoughts in my head. When I got to my small brick house on the edge of town, I didn't turn on the television or pour myself a drink. I went straight to the study, opened the file cabinet, and pulled out the folders I hadn't touched in years. Mortgage payments, car repairs, school fees, grocery transfers, utility bills. 15 years of love disguised as bank statements. I stacked them on the desk. Tall, undeniable proof of what I'd given, what I'd enabled. Then I opened a fresh notebook, flipped to the first page, and wrote in bold letters, "Support terminated. Effective. Immediately." I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of clarity. There was no hangover from the wine I didn't drink, no guilt from the truth I'd finally spoken, only stillness, both outside my window and inside my chest. For the first time in a decade, I didn't feel like a man sleepwalking through someone else's life. I made coffee. Strong. Black. Saturday at the kitchen table, and watched the sunrise turn my backyard golden. Then I walked into the study and opened the same drawer I'd left open the night before. 15 years of paperwork stared back at me. Mortgage transfers, school tuition, medical bills, all with my name at the bottom of each check. Quiet, invisible, expected. That ended today. I spent the next 3 hours making calls. Hi, yes. I'd like to cancel all automatic payments from checking account 6,187. Mortgage for 3,084 Pine Ridge? Yes. Discontinue effective immediately. No. I do not need to speak with the account holder. I am the account funder. Every department had their own protocol. Some required passwords, others a security code. But none of them asked me why I was stopping. No one asked, what changed? And that struck me as odd. Because what had changed wasn't numbers. It was respect. I crossed off each item from my notebook like a man on a mission. Mortgage, gone. School tuition, gone. Brian's car lease, canceled. Melissa's insurance premiums, revoked. Every quiet little lifeline I'd kept humming in the background switched off. By noon, I had completed 12 calls. Then I made one more. Raymond. I said when my financial advisor picked up, I need to redirect some funds. We're going to revisit that European cruise plan Martha and I shelved years ago. There was a pause, then a chuckle. It's about time, Dan. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. It was as though I'd spent 15 years underwater and had finally kicked back to the surface. The silence didn't last long. At 12. 43. Pay me. My phone rang. Melissa. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. He, sweetheart. Her voice was strained, trying to sound calm, but I could hear the edge underneath. Dad? Something weird happened. Our mortgage payment bounced. The bank said there were insufficient funds. That's correct. There was a pause. Wait, what? You canceled the payment? I did. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her breathing shift. You didn't even warn us. No, I didn't. But Dad, we're already behind on credit card payments. The property taxes are due in 2 weeks. And Emma's tuition. Melissa, I said quietly, I told you last night. I'm no longer your ATM. But you promised, Mom. I promised your mother I'd help you get stable. It's been 15 years. If this is stability, then something went wrong. She fell silent. I'm not doing this out of anger, I continued. But out of necessity. I won't allow you to treat help as entitlement anymore. Dad, her voice cracked now, we'll lose the house. Then you'll learn what a house actually costs. The line went dead. By 3 p.m., Brian called. I didn't even bother letting it ring twice. Mark, he began, his voice tight with performative calm. This little stunt of yours, it's not funny. It's not a stunt, it's a boundary. You can't just pull the plug like this. There are legal expectations. This is financial abandonment. You want to talk legal? I said, standing up and walking to the kitchen window. Show me the contract where I agreed to support your entire lifestyle indefinitely. He was quiet, then scoffed. You always acted like you were fine with it. That was before your wife joked about me being an ATM in front of 50 people. He went silent again, then mumbled something about calling his lawyer. I almost laughed. Please do. I'll happily bring 15 years of receipts to court. After I hung up, I felt no satisfaction, only a strange, hollow stillness. They weren't used to me saying no. They weren't used to seeing the man who had given everything, take something back. By Friday morning, the storm had begun. I had expected calls, certainly. Maybe a dramatic doorstep appearance or two. What I hadn't anticipated was the ripple effect. How quickly the absence of my quiet support would expose the cracks beneath their lives. At 8:12 a.m., I received a voicemail from the bank. A missed mortgage payment, $3,084 due immediately. A $75 late fee had already been applied. At 9:05, the private school where Emma and Josh were enrolled called to confirm that the semester tuition hadn't gone through. The receptionist's voice was kind, but firm. "We will need full payment by Monday, or the children will be suspended from class." At 10:27, the dealership handling Brian's luxury SUV lease attempted to process their usual monthly payment. Declined. Another voicemail, then an email, then another email this time, from Melissa. Subject: "We need to talk. Please. Dad, I'm not sure what happened or why you're doing this. We're not perfect, but this is too far. Emma cried herself to sleep last night. Josh doesn't understand why we might not be able to stay in our house. I've applied to a few places part-time jobs, but nothing pays enough. Brian is talking about pulling the kids out of school. He says we should sell the car, maybe rent out the basement. But this is humiliating, Dad. Please, can we talk?" I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed them to feel this, not just the financial squeeze, but the weight of what had been silently carried on my shoulders all those years. Gratitude only grows in the shadow of absence. At 12:40 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Brian on my porch, standing a little too tall, dressed like he'd come straight from a board meeting. Dark suit, shiny shoes, eyes full of condescension poorly disguised as concern. "We need to put an end to this," he said, skipping pleasantries. "I agree," I replied, not moving from the doorway. "You're making Melissa sick with stress. Emma's acting out at school. Josh thinks you don't love him anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "Because I stopped paying your bills?" He exhaled sharply. "You're punishing the kids for our mistakes." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself from being taken for granted. And I'm giving your kids a chance to see what personal responsibility looks like." He stepped forward, but I didn't budge. "You don't know how hard we've had it." "Brian," I said, voice low but steady. "You've never had it hard. You've had me." His jaw tightened. "You bought a $60,000 car on a $70,000 salary because you knew I'd bail you out. You enrolled the kids in private school knowing you couldn't afford it. You remodeled your kitchen, took 2 vacations a year, bought designer clothes, and not once did you ask if I was okay footing the bill. We assumed." "Exactly," I cut in. "You assumed, because I let you. That ends now." He looked like he wanted to argue, but found no solid ground to stand on. After a long pause, he stepped back. "You'll regret this," he said. "No," I replied, closing the door slowly. "I'm finally remembering who I was before I became your wallet." Saturday morning brought a different kind of message, one that pierced me deeper than Brian ever could. It was from Emma. A handwritten card slipped under my front door. "Grandpa, Mommy said you're mad at us. I don't know why. Did I do something wrong? I miss our Sundays. Can we still go get pancakes next week? I love you. Emma." I held the card in my hands for a long time. I read it 3 times. My hands trembled not from anger, but from guilt. Emma hadn't laughed at me. Emma hadn't mocked my retirement or turned my support into a family joke. Emma just missed her grandfather. I placed the card on my mantel and stared at the photo beside it. Me and Martha, our arms around a much younger Melissa at her college graduation. We looked proud, hopeful, united. If Martha were here, what would she say? Probably this: "You can still love them, Dan. Just don't lose yourself doing it." Sunday evening, Melissa finally called again. This time, her voice was raw. "I cleaned houses yesterday," she said, skipping hello. 4 of them. My back's killing me. Brian's driving the kids to school in a borrowed sedan because the SUV's gone. And I started crying at the grocery store because I couldn't afford the organic cereal Emma likes. I listened. "I'm not asking you to fix it," she continued. "I just want to know, do you still love us?" That question broke something open in me. I had spent so long being their provider, I'd forgotten how to be their father. I didn't want Emma and Josh growing up thinking love was something that came with a receipt. "I never stopped loving you," I said. "But I stopped enabling you. And I think you needed that." Silence. Then a breath. A small, shaky inhale. "What do we do now?" "You figure out how to live within your means. You cut back. You downsize. You teach your children that dignity doesn't come from granite countertops or ballet classes. It comes from honesty and humility. Another silence. Then, for the first time in years, I heard something I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry, Dad." 3 words. Quiet. Honest. Real. I didn't realize how much we'd come to rely on you, or how little we showed appreciation for it. I felt my throat tighten. "We're applying for a smaller place," she said. "Emma's school has a scholarship option. Josh is okay with switching to public school. Brian, well, he's adjusting slower, but we'll get there." "That's a start." She hesitated. "Would you still come by sometime? Maybe. Have dinner? The kids miss you." I smiled. "I miss them too." "And Dad?" "Yes. Thank you. For everything. Even when I didn't say it." That night, I sat in my study, surrounded by old receipts, financial statements, and notes scribbled in Martha's handwriting. I could feel her presence in the room. Not as a ghost, but as a reminder. A reminder that being a father never ends, but sometimes, the way you father has to change. I pulled out a clean page from my notebook and began a new list. Not of payments to cancel, but of boundaries to build. Boundaries protect love. They don't replace it. And for the first time since retirement, I felt like I was finally starting to live on my own terms. By Monday morning, the shift had begun. Not a seismic event, nothing dramatic or headline-worthy, but in subtle ways, like the soft creaking of a ship slowly turning, I could feel things begin to change. Melissa called again, this time to tell me she'd accepted a part-time position at a local bakery. She didn't sound proud. She didn't sound ashamed either. Just grounded, tired, human. "I clock in at 6 a.m., she said. "I'm usually frosting cinnamon rolls before the sun comes up." "How's it feel?" I asked. She chuckled faintly. "Sticky." That was the first time in weeks I'd heard even a hint of humor in her voice. Later that afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note on a piece of notebook paper, folded 3 times, smudged slightly at the corner. "Mr. Everett, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to speak to me again. But Melissa told me you helped cancel the lease on the SUV, and I wanted to say thank you. I didn't realize how much we'd built our lives on borrowed money and borrowed kindness, and I especially didn't realize how much of that kindness came from you. I'm sorry for what I said at dinner, for the jokes, for the arrogance. I've started working Saturdays at the hardware store. It's humbling, but it's honest. I hope someday I can earn back the respect I lost. Brian." I set the letter down on my desk and stared out the window. For the first time in 15 years, he'd said something that sounded like a man taking ownership of his choices. That weekend, I decided to visit the grocery store where Melissa worked. I didn't announce myself. I didn't call ahead. I simply drove to the strip mall off Jefferson Avenue and walked in around 10 a.m., when the morning rush had thinned. I spotted her near the floral section, straightening bouquets. She wore a green apron over her sweater, her hair pulled back, sleeves rolled. Her posture was tired, but focused. She didn't see me at first. I watched as an older woman approached with a question about roses, and Melissa answered with patience and a small, practiced smile. That was new. When she turned and saw me, her eyes widened. "Dad," she breathed, glancing at the clock. "I'm on break in 5 minutes." I nodded. "I'll wait." We sat outside on a bench near the entrance. The air smelled of damp pavement and early spring. "I'm surprised you came," she said, sipping a bottle of water. "I wanted to see for myself." She looked down at her lap. "It's not glamorous. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be real." Melissa nodded slowly. "Every time someone from our neighborhood walks in, I flinch. Last week, Mrs. Caldwell came through my line. She asked if Brian got laid off. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't correct her," she added with a sad smile. "For once, I didn't feel the need to defend our image. That made me prouder than anything she'd said in years." "You know," I said, leaning back, "your mother once worked 2 jobs while I was in grad school. She waited tables and cleaned houses, never once complained." Melissa blinked. "You never told me that. There's a lot I never told you, because I wanted you to grow up feeling secure, not stressed. But maybe I should have told you more." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need filling. Before we parted, I handed her a small envelope. She looked wary. "Dad, if this is money..." "It's not." I gestured to open it. Inside was a printed list, simple bullet points. "I will cover Emma and Josh's school tuition directly. I will handle their medical expenses, sports activities, and essential clothing. I will not pay for your mortgage, car, or lifestyle expenses. You and Brian are responsible for your household budget. Family dinners will happen once a month at my house. Gratitude is no longer assumed, it must be expressed. Honesty is non-negotiable. Melissa read it twice, then looked up. Is this permanent? It's a new foundation, I said, if you want to rebuild from here. She folded the paper carefully, tucked it into her apron, and nodded. I do. The next Saturday, we had our first family dinner since the reunion. Nothing fancy, just my old roast chicken recipe, mashed potatoes, green beans. Melissa brought a pie from the bakery. Brian arrived in jeans and a sweater, not a suit. No wine, no grand speeches. Just real food, and the sound of forks clinking against plates. Emma and Josh chattered about school. Emma proudly shared that she'd been selected to play a solo at her spring concert. That's wonderful, I said. We'll have to go shopping for a new dress. She lit up like a sunrise. Really? Of course. But only if you promise to play that solo for me before the big night. Deal. Melissa watched the exchange with soft eyes. Brian said little, but listened more. When he did speak, it was measured, sincere. After dinner, while the kids played in the living room, Melissa helped me wash the dishes. You know what I realized? She said, drying a plate. For years, we thought we were building a family. But really, we were just decorating one. I glanced at her. Now, she continued, it finally feels like something solid. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Some lessons you can't teach with money. They have to be earned with sweat, humility, and time. As they left that night, Emma hugged me tighter than usual. Grandpa, she whispered, I'm glad you're still ours. He killed down, eye level. I always was, sweetheart. I just needed you all to remember what that really means. I had thought the hardest part was overdrawing the line, standing my ground, enforcing it. But as it turns out, personal transformation is just the first act. The second act? That's where the world catches up to your change. Or doesn't. Monday morning, I received a call from Janet, my late wife's sister. I was at the post office, she said, cutting straight to the point. Marge Peterson was there. She asked if you really cut Melissa off to punish her. My grip on the phone tightened. She said Brian told people you were angry about not being the center of attention anymore, that you were getting forgetful, moody. I exhaled slowly. That's not true, Janet. You know that. I do, she replied. But others don't. And you've been quiet for so long, they're filling in the blanks themselves. That same afternoon, I went into town for groceries. As I turned into the produce aisle, I heard them two women from church whispering near the potatoes. Heard he pulled all their funding overnight. Didn't even warn them. After everything she did for him when Martha died. So cold. They went quiet when they saw me. Smiled politely. Said nothing. But I had heard enough. That night, I called Melissa. You need to set the record straight, I told her. Publicly. She didn't hesitate. You're right. 2 days later, an open letter appeared in the Nashville Neighborhood Weekly, our small community paper. To our friends and neighbors, we want to clarify recent events involving our family, specifically my father, Daniel Everett. For over 15 years, my father supported us in ways we never deserved. He paid our mortgage, our children's private school tuition, medical bills, and more. Not because we asked, but because he loved us. Over time, we allowed that generosity to become expected. Worse, we forgot to say thank you. At a recent family gathering, we made jokes that diminished his sacrifice. He responded not with anger, but with boundaries. Boundaries we should have honored long ago. We are now living within our means. We've downsized. I'm working at a bakery. My husband works weekends at a hardware store. Our children are still thriving, because my father continues to support their education and well-being directly. If you heard a different version of this story, we ask that you consider this one the truth. We are not victims of cruelty. We are recipients of mercy, long overdue for accountability. Dad, we love you. We're sorry, and we're grateful. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't go viral. But it landed exactly where it needed to. 2 days later, I got a call from Mrs. Peterson. Dan, she said sheepishly, I just read the letter. I owe you an apology. No need, I replied. I just appreciate you taking the time to read it. Then came the Facebook post. Melissa posted a photo of me and the grandkids, one from a few summers ago at the lake, with Josh on my shoulders and Emma splashing in the water. Her caption read, For 15 years, this man carried our family. Not with pride or demands, but with love. We forgot to honor that. Today, we start again with gratitude. The comments were overwhelming. So powerful. Thank you for sharing this. Mr. Everett, You are an inspiration. I didn't care about the praise. What mattered was this. The truth had found daylight. Brian came by that Sunday to mow my lawn. He didn't say much, just showed up with his old push mower and got to work. No eye contact, no small talk, just a quiet act of service. When he finished, sweat clinging to his collar, he came to the porch where I was drinking sweet tea. You didn't have to do that, I said. I know, he replied. That's why I did it. He hesitated, then reached into his back pocket and handed me a check. Sambe. It's not much, he said, but we're starting to pay back what we can. Melissa said you'd probably rip it up. I stared at it for a moment, then folded it and placed it under my glass. I won't cash it, but I won't throw it away either. He nodded. Fair enough. Emma called that night. Giddy. Grandpa, guess what? What, sweetheart? I won the music scholarship. Miss Hanley said I was the youngest student ever to get it. That's amazing. I want to play my song for you when you come on Saturday. And I made you something. Oh? It's a thank you jar. Every time we think of something we're grateful for, we write it down and put it inside. You have 7 already. My throat tightened. That sounds like the best gift anyone's ever made me. She giggled. You're going to need a big shelf. Late that night, I stood at my window and looked out over the quiet neighborhood. The same streets I'd walked with Martha. The same front yard where I'd taught Melissa to ride a bike. For so long, I thought love meant giving without limits. But now I understood something deeper. Love isn't limitless giving. It's giving with integrity, with clarity, with courage. Setting boundaries didn't diminish my love, it protected it. And it helped my daughter and her family rediscover their own strength. Tomorrow would bring another quiet day in retirement. But tonight, my heart felt a little lighter. And that, I thought, was the start of something good. The next few weeks unfolded slowly, like spring buds after a long winter tentative, quiet but undeniable. Melissa and Brian were no longer the polished couple with the designer clothes and catered dinner parties. They'd become something more real, more human. They showed up late to church because of bakery shifts and soccer games. They wore tired smiles and secondhand coats. And for once, no one whispered behind their backs. They were rebuilding. And this time, it wasn't with my checkbook. One Tuesday morning, I found Melissa waiting on my porch with a to-go coffee and a folder in her lap. Budget review, she said, handing me the folder. Inside were spreadsheets color-coded, neatly printed. Rent for a 2-bedroom townhouse. Public school fees. Grocery receipts. A small savings account labeled rainy day fund. We're making it work, she said, her voice both proud and uncertain. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. You're doing well, I replied, flipping through each page slowly. Josh is tutoring math for extra cash. Brian's walking dogs on weekends. And I'm okay. Tired, but okay. We sat in silence, sipping coffee. I miss the big house sometimes, she admitted. Not for the space, but for the illusion that everything was under control. I looked at her closely. And now? Now it's not about illusion. It's about actual control. Real decisions, real consequences. She paused. I thought I'd feel ashamed, but I don't. That made me prouder than anything she could have shown me in those spreadsheets. That Saturday, the kids came over for our monthly family dinner, this time without their parents. Just grandpa and grandkids, like the old days. Emma brought her thank you jar. It was already full. Grandpa, you need to pick one, she said, shaking it in front of me. I reached inside and pulled out a tiny folded slip of pink paper. I'm thankful Grandpa made Mom smile again. I stared at it longer than I should have. My fingers trembled. Did you write this? I asked. She nodded. When we moved to the small house, Mommy was really sad. But after she got the bakery job, she started singing in the kitchen again. I think it was your idea that helped. I swallowed hard and pulled her into a hug. Sometimes, love works better when it's quieter. The next day, Brian asked to meet me at the hardware store. I'm thinking of applying for a management role here, he said. They need someone full-time. It's less money than my old job, but more stability, fewer lies. I nodded. Sounds like a step in the right direction. Melissa and I were talking about going back to school, at night, part-time. She wants to finish her nutrition degree. I'm thinking of getting certified in HVAC repair. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's humbling, starting over. It's also courageous, I replied. Pride builds walls. Courage builds futures. He chuckled. You always say stuff like that. Did you rehearse these speeches? Just live them. 3 weeks later, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Again. Mr. Everett, I paid off our last credit card today. Took 3 months. We cut everything: streaming services, takeout, unnecessary memberships. I walk to work most days now, not because I have to, but because it reminds me what I'm walking toward. I don't know if I'll ever feel like I deserve your forgiveness, but I'm working toward being the kind of man who earns second chances. Brian. I folded the letter and tucked it beside the first one in my study drawer. They weren't repayments in the financial sense, but, in terms of growth, they were worth more than money. At our April family dinner, Melissa brought over homemade lasagna. Not from a restaurant, not from a box. My first time making it from scratch, she said nervously. Be honest. I took one bite and smiled. It tastes like effort. She laughed, one of those deep, relieved laughs that bubbles out when you've been holding your breath too long. Josh gave me a handmade coupon book, 1 free car wash, 1 lawn mowing, 1 quiet day pass from Emma. I figured you deserve some help too, he said. Thanks, buddy. After dinner, the kids put on a little performance. Emma played piano, while Josh read a poem he'd written for school about the strongest person I know. It was about his mom. I watched from the couch, heart full. This was what rebuilding looked like. Not perfection, not luxury, but effort, awareness, connection. After the performance, Melissa sat next to me and whispered, I'm applying to a community leadership course this summer. It's free, and they take 1 person from each neighborhood. I want to be someone Emma looks up to, not just someone she depends on. You already are, I said softly. That night, I stood in my quiet living room long after they left, staring at the family photo on the wall. Martha, Melissa as a teen, me in my work shirt and calloused hands. I wondered what Martha would say now. I hoped she'd be proud, not because the family was perfect, but because they were finally learning to stand on their own feet and still lean on each other without collapsing. Because love didn't mean giving endlessly. It meant giving the right way, at the right time, for the right reasons. And finally, I'd learned how. There's a certain peace that comes with watching your children become people you'd admire, even if they weren't your own. For the first time in years, I didn't feel needed. I felt respected, and that distinction made all the difference. The shift was subtle at first. Melissa stopped asking for things and started sharing accomplishments. She called not to plead for help, but to update me about her goals, her job, the kids' milestones. Our conversations turned from transactional to relational. Dad, Emma aced her science project, she said one evening. She built a solar oven and made s'mores on the blacktop at school. She gets her curiosity from your mother, I replied, smiling, and her stubbornness from me. Melissa laughed. You know what she told her teacher? That she wants to be an inventor so she can make a gratitude detector, a machine that beeps whenever someone forgets to say thank you. That girl might change the world. She already changed ours. In early May, Brian stopped by with a toolbox and a sheepish grin. Your back porch railing is loose, he said, already walking toward it. Wasn't aware it needed fixing. You weren't supposed to be, he replied, rolling up his sleeves. I stood nearby, sipping coffee as he worked. No fanfare, no speech, just one man quietly repairing something he hadn't built but now wanted to maintain. You know, he said while tightening a bolt, I used to think legacy was about money, property, providing the best of everything. That's what I thought too, I replied, until Martha died. He glanced up. After that, I continued, I realized legacy is what they remember about how you lived, not just what you gave. Respect, accountability, compassion. Those stick longer than a granite countertop. Brian nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. I used to brag about my success. Now I brag about how we're finally debt-free. That used to feel small. Now it feels like everything. The next week, Melissa invited me to a small event at the community center, her final presentation for the neighborhood leadership program. Just a few people, some slides, a short speech, she said. I'd really like you to be there. Of course I went. She stood in front of a modest crowd, neighbors, a few officials, some friends from church. She wore a navy blouse, slacks that didn't cost more than $50, and a confidence I hadn't seen in her in years. My name is Melissa Everett, she began, and 3 months ago I was a woman who couldn't tell the difference between support and dependence. She paused. I used to think strength meant hiding struggle, projecting success, living up to some image of what a perfect family looked like. And when that illusion cracked, I blamed the people around me, especially my father. Her eyes found mine in the crowd. But it turns out, strength means owning your mistakes, starting over, and saying thank you not once but consistently, out loud, publicly. There was a silence afterward, Not uncomfortable, just weighty. Real. Later, as we walked to the parking lot, she slipped her arm through mine. I meant every word. I know. And Dad? Yes? I want Emma and Josh to talk about me the way I talk about you now. That Sunday, we held our monthly family dinner a little differently. Instead of hosting it at my house, they invited me to theirs. Their townhouse was smaller, but cozy, clean, simple, filled with laughter. Melissa cooked baked chicken with rosemary and carrots. Brian set the table with mismatched dishes. Emma made place cards with everyone's name. Josh burned the garlic bread, but we ate it anyway. After dessert, the kids brought out a large wrapped box. For you, Grandpa, Emma said. From all of us. I opened it to find a handmade scrapbook. The cover read, 15 years of love you never asked to be paid for. Inside were drawings, old photos, letters, and notes from each of them. Melissa's read. I spent so long trying to prove I was capable that I forgot you were never judging me. You were protecting me. Thank you for showing me what true love and true boundaries look like. Brian's read. You gave us more than money. You gave us time to grow up. I'm sorry it took so long, but I see it now. Thank you for never walking away, even when you should have. Emma's was simple. I love you, Grandpa. You're the reason I believe in good people. Josh said, thanks for teaching me what a real man looks like. I closed the book, blinking away the sting behind my eyes. You okay, Dad? Melissa asked gently. I nodded. I think I've been waiting for this for a long time. Not the book, not the dinner, but this, the understanding, the healing, the shift from being needed to being known. That night, I sat in my study and placed the scrapbook next to my wife's photo. Her smile still watched over the room like a quiet guardian. I think we did okay, Martha, I whispered. Eventually, summer arrived slowly that year. The days stretched longer, and the trees in my backyard grew thick with leaves. Sparrows returned to their usual roost in the oak out front, and I resumed my early morning routine coffee on the porch, newspaper in hand, the sound of the town waking up around me. But something was different. Not outside, but in me. For the first time since retirement, I wasn't haunted by stillness. I wasn't waiting for the next crisis call, the next check to send, the next unspoken plea from Melissa or Brian. Instead, I found a quiet joy in watching them stand tall, on ground they had finally learned to steady themselves on. One Tuesday morning, I was fixing a loose hinge on the garage door when I heard the familiar sound of Emma's bicycle tires crunching against the gravel. She hopped off, breathless, cheeks pink from the ride. Grandpa, I got in. In where? The Youth Science Expo. I submitted my solar oven project, and they picked it for the regional showcase in Chattanooga. I hugged her tight. That's incredible, sweetheart. And guess what else? Mom said I could ride with you if you're free that weekend. Free? I wouldn't miss it for the world. She grinned, then pulled a crumpled permission slip from her backpack. I told my teacher you're the best road trip buddy. That afternoon, I cleared the calendar I didn't even keep. The following week, Melissa stopped by on her lunch break. She brought sandwiches and sat across from me at the kitchen table, just like she used to when she was in high school and needed help with chemistry homework. I got promoted, she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. To what? Assistant manager. More hours, slightly better pay. But more than that, trust. She took a bite of her sandwich, then set it down. They're asking me to train new hires. Me, can you believe that? I could. She'd come far. I'm proud of you, I said. And I don't say that lightly. She smiled. I know. There was a pause, then she added, I think about Mom a lot lately. What she'd say if she saw us now. I looked out the window, the sunlight painting golden shapes across the kitchen floor. She'd say you finally learned how strong you always were. That Sunday was Father's Day. For the first time in years, we didn't celebrate at a restaurant. We had a backyard picnic at the kids' new place, nothing fancy. Folding chairs, paper plates, the smell of charcoal and sunscreen. Josh manned the grill, proudly overcooking the burgers. Emma made homemade lemonade. Brian brought his infamous too-sweet coleslaw. Melissa baked a pie with real strawberries. As we ate, Emma stood and cleared her throat. I wrote a poem, she said. It's called What a Grandpa Is. We all quieted down. She read, A grandpa is someone who remembers what you forget, who shows up even when you didn't ask, who stops giving so you can start growing, and never once stops loving. She finished, and the silence that followed was thicker than applause. I wiped my eyes. You'll make a fine writer someday. I just tell the truth, she said. Later that evening, As the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat on the porch swing with Brian. He handed me a cold bottle of root beer. "No speeches," he said. "Just this thank you. Not just for what you gave, but for what you stopped giving." I nodded. We clinked bottles. The next morning, I started writing again. Not checks, not to-do lists, but actual words, pages. I opened a new notebook and began outlining a memoir not for publishing, just for the grandkids. I called it What I Didn't Say Then, because now I realized how much of our family's past had been shaped by things left unsaid, and maybe the future could be stronger if we remembered those lessons out loud. In early July, I took Emma to the science fair. It was a modest event, held in a gymnasium with rows of folding tables and cardboard displays. But she wore a white lab coat over her dress and explained her project with the poise of someone twice her age. When the judges gave her a special recognition ribbon, she turned and whispered, "We did it." "No," I said, smiling. "You did." On the drive home, she fell asleep in the passenger seat, clutching the ribbon. I kept glancing at her, my heart full of quiet joy. This was the reward. Not the money, not the validation, but the knowledge that my love, my boundaries, and even my silence had helped grow something strong and kind. A legacy, not of wealth, but of wisdom. Back home, I returned to my study and added one last page to the scrapbook the family had made for me. On it, I wrote, "I thought I'd lose them if I stopped saving them, but in letting go, I gave them room to become more. And that is the truest act of fatherhood."